All right, I'm live, guys. Uh, I was planning on doing something later for Thanksgiving Day stuff, so I still might do that. But I wanted to show a bit of a discovery that I had, which I think is really interesting. You guys might not think so, but that's okay because I think it's interesting. So, um, the whole proprietary parts things just drives me crazy. I just it does, and the odd thing is I'm kind of going at least sort of backwards, but let me bring you up here that way you can see comments. And I don't have much battery left here, but it's okay. So I figured something out that I think is interesting here, and let's explore. Hey, Craig, William. So you guys, I think you guys are gonna like this. At the very least, it's interesting. We're gonna do a little bit of specifications and whatnot. Um, and it has to do with this 440. So the 440 that's here, that's in pieces now, because I took it apart and I was fiddling around by myself, not with you guys. Sorry. Um, but I took it apart, I was fiddling around, and trying to figure out something about this PTO side bearing. Now, the PTO side bearing for a 440, and this is actually I think the Chinese version, but um, I've had a number of issues with this. One of them was on the original case, the inner race here has a different thickness than the outer race. And the one that was put on there initially had a different thickness to the inner race than this one does. So then I was left wondering what was actual spec and what's the problem with all that. So I figured that out backwardsly, if that's a word, because as I was doing the bearing and the clutch and all the other stuff in there, I couldn't put the E-clip on. I was like, why is that? It feels like something's not seated right. Turns out everything was seated right, but the inner race was too thick for some dumb reason. I don't know. So I put this bearing in it, and it was fine. Then you can get the E-clip on at the end because all the thicknesses. So crank goes through, and you have the thicknesses of the bushing, and then there's a washer, and then there's the clutch and the drum, and et cetera, et cetera. So you have all that stuff that stacks, and then on the crank you have to put this clip, so you have all this stack of stuff here, and then on the crank you have to put this clip on at the end. And if all that stuff is too thick, then you're never going to get that clip on. That's a problem that I had. It was a couple years ago. And what I came to was that the inner race here, and if we measure it, the correct dimension is 9 millimeters thick this way of just the inner race. It was 10 millimeters on the one that had been installed at the factory, so it was wrong from the factory. All right, let's move on from that, because that's the 9 millimeters is the spec that it's supposed to be. So you can, when you put bearings in, you measure it and make sure. But what if you don't want to use the steel style bearing? What if for some dumb reason you don't have access to it? What can you do? Enter Husqvarna OEM 525-43-4201. So this is a 346 XP bearing. Guess what? They're more or less the same size. Not exact, but more or less the same size. So we're going to go through it. Hey everybody. Yeah, happy Thanksgiving. So I'm excited about this. So I was trying to figure out, will it work? So there's a few issues with getting this to work. One is, will it physically fit? And the answer is yes, it will. It'll physically fit in the case because they're both 35 millimeter outer diameter bearings. So it'll fit in the crankcase. We know that. Okay. This dimension, is it the same? The outer dimensions, that's 13 millimeters. Don't want any debris in this because it's brand new. Don't want to. That's 12. Okay. So it's slightly shorter in that way. Is that a problem? I don't think so. So as long as you take the new bearing and bring it flush, I don't think it'll be an issue. So why the original bearing here has this funky inset. It's a cutoff, and it's where the seal actually attaches. 30, almost 33 millimeters. Here's the oiler. $35. Well, now that's interesting. So does the oiler get centered up by the bearing? No, it does not. No, it doesn't. What the oiler does do is when you're pulling the bearing into the crankcase, it provides a stop, but it doesn't center it. One does not necessarily center the other. How's that for interesting? Okay. So you can have a positive stop one against the other. That's no problem. Do you need it? I would contend no. I would contend no. So what could you do? Let's go back to the crank, something else. On the crank, right here, you can hear that. So there's a land here. So if the bearing stops here, then this won't rub on the boss here. So as long as we put the bearing flush with this boss, I don't think we're going to have a problem. So, did an experiment without using the good one. Use an old 6202. This is just for experimentation purposes, just an old bearing. Does it fit? And the answer is, oh yes, it does. So I put this down about a millimeter extra because hang on, we're gonna keep going with this theme here. You guys are gonna see the mad scientist part of this. Okay. So regular 6202s are 11 millimeters. That's 12. Okay. So I have to basically simulate a 12 millimeter bearing in here just to see if it'll fit. So I've inset this by 1 millimeter. Does the oiler fit? As it turns out, it fits nice and snug and flush. Perfect. All right. What's the next fitment issue? So the bearing will fit, and because it has a seal integrated, I don't need to worry about tapping in a seal or worry about the bushing here sealing or not sealing or whatever and what have you. This proprietary bearing, which I hate, will fit. But then the next issue comes, the bushing, which actually goes in there, by the way. That bushing goes in there. That bushing is stacked on top of a 9 millimeter inner race. If you put it down here, which it will be fine there, Now it's stacked on top of a 12 millimeter inner race, which means this is going to be 3 millimeters further out than otherwise. So the easy thing here is to grind off 3 millimeters off this bushing. And I'm going to grind it off this side of the bushing on a lathe. Might not even necessarily need a lathe, but because it doesn't really matter. As long as you put 3 millimeters off of it, it just has to ride on the inner race. It's not a wear thing. Here it would be wear. It's a wear issue and a seal issue. Here, the seal is already done for you, so you don't have to worry about it. You just need to kind of thin this dimension by 3 millimeters, and you want to do it from this side, not from that side. But it'll take 3 millimeters away here, and then it'll just ride perfectly there. And because the crank's there, it'll be centered. And then the oiler worm will ride there perfectly, and it'll be fine. Happy day. I think we're going to do it. Not today. Hey, thanks. It's not gonna happen today because I need the new crankcase. I'm getting a new crankcase. I'm just gonna start fresh. I'm gonna take this one and eventually just toss it. And yeah, that's what's gonna happen. We're gonna do this. So, advantages, disadvantages. If I had to choose between this style of bearing and this style of bearing, I think I'm going to choose this style. And the reason is because the seal is already installed for me at the factory. I just don't have to worry about it at all. Zip, zilch, zero. Don't worry about the seal. Don't worry about the bushing in and out, all that stuff. Because the bushing, same on a 372, by the way, the bushing, you have to seal it between the rubber and the bushing, and as it's spinning, and technically speaking, internally it's got a seal as well between the bushing and the inner race. That way you don't have any air going internally that way, between the bushing and the crank. So it's kind of like this triple funky seal thing, and on the 372, it's got the same idea, and that drives me plenty crazy. So one day, I'm going to use this on a 372. Shh, don't tell anybody. It's going to happen there also. Again, I hate these bearings. I can't stand them. But if they've designed something funky, you might as well use it. What I would rather, because this is like $35, as opposed to like a Nachi, which is like $6. My opinion, the bearings pressed into the case and seals pressed into the casting of the case. That's it. It's cheap, it's easy, it's simple. Make the bearings the same size for both sides and make the seals the same size for both sides. Why in the world would you do it any different? Doesn't make any sense to me. That's life. You know what I mean? If I had my druthers, that's what I would do. But since we're playing around with this saw as a general thing, let's play. Thoughts, comments? Where did the baggie for this thing go? Lost the baggie for it. Doesn't matter. Baggie. Hey Bob. So let's see who's here. Bob, Harry, Craig, the Mr. and maybe the Mrs. too. I don't know. Pate's Performance, good. Georgie's here. William Prophet, welcome, per usual. Craig. Who else? Did I forget anybody? So I do have something fun potentially to do later. Oh, I found the bag. Do have something fun potentially to do later. For right now, let's move on from all this bearing stuff, which has to be my thing. I've got to remember to bring this to the folks tomorrow. Put this in the lathe and get that machine. All right. What's up next? The 262. We got to work on the 262 just real quick. I need to get a squish number. So let's do a little bit of cleanup, and then we'll do that. Case bolts. Oh, one other interesting thing. So pulling bearings, guess what? Piece of like 2-inch PVC or 1.5 inch, whatever this is. If it's over there, you just put that on there and you just pull it right in and it works. So, yeah, perfect. We'll go over that in a little more detail some other day, but piece of PVC tends to be darn handy every now and again. Quickly clean all this stuff up. On to the 262, which I have to work on here for Mason, and then because I got to get a squish number and then get it sent down to Mike Shetley to have him go over a little bit. I'm just going to hit this with some Scotch-Brite real quick. So I think the cylinder is going to be fine. It needs a little bit of touch up, but pretty smooth actually. Nice thing, this already has the gasket still on there, so the squish band just looks like it was shot peened, so there's really not a whole lot of point in not sending this down to be, you know, worked on. It'd be helpful to have a piston first. Right? No? So might as well check Squish, you know, and if it's going to mic, you might as well optimize it too. You know? It's silly to not do that, even if we're going to leave this basically stock. Need a couple of screws here. Of course, not going to go through there. There. Where's my brain? Put a screw there? Weird. Okay. Don't remember that, but alright. So now this is 30,000 solder. and nothing's happening at 30,000. So the squish here is a little bit on the big side, so now I'm bringing out the bigger solder. This is 60,000 solder. So we have 36, with a gasket, we have 36 thousandths. 25 and 10, yeah, so 35 thousandths. So now what I can do with that information is very simply have Mike clean up the squish band, make it nice, and then take an appropriate amount off the base, and then you've got it. Pretty thick gasket, 30 thousandths. I'll bring that with, send that with him. A thick gasket. So, what do we have for? Yeah, you can get really screwed up pretty easily here. And this is an OEM gasket. I think this feels thick too. So. The 30 thousandth gasket. That's a really That's a 35 thousandths gasket. The thick gasket. Well, whatever. I guess I'll send that with it. I'll keep these gaskets here. Less likely to get something buggered if it's in there. Okay, so squish with the gasket is 35. Yep. Okay, so now that we have that, now I can go right back to regular scheduled programming, I guess. Trying to find something else to work on. I've got to package this up to send it down to Mike, and yeah. So what I should do is do a little more 346 porting. I may come back later and do that. Let me spend some time packaging this stuff up. I don't need to bore you guys with that. Questions, comments, anything else on the Squish stuff, or on the 440 bearing issue? All right, I'll say I'm out then, and I will catch you guys some other time. Yeah, there's a anybody wants a tool set, they can send me an email. You can look at the link that Bob just posted. For that, you can find my email address, or if you want to support the channel, just go to that link that's there in the live chat feed that Bob just posted. Thanks, Bob. Appreciate it. Appreciate the moderating, and I'll probably be on later, and we'll hang out a little bit more. But let me get everything cleaned up and do some Thanksgiving stuff. All right. Take care, guys. Have a great Thanksgiving.